Alrighty. Hi, everybody. My name is Catherine. Welcome to Introduction to Caving for She Jumps. I'm going to share my screen if I can figure that out. Give me just one second. I think we should be full screen. Alrighty. So if you're not familiar with She Jumps, we're a national nonprofit and we promote the outdoor involvement for women and girls in the outdoors. Through education, involvement, in an effort to foster leadership, confidence, and to build community. And we love what we do. We love the outdoors. I do. I know I do. And caving is one of the things that I am most passionate about. I have been involved with caving for almost 20 years. I started when I was about 12, and it's been a love of mine always. I love everything about the outdoors, but caving has just always been something that is super close to my heart. And I wanted to share it with other people. And so here we go. Reasons to go caving. If you need a reason to go caving, I will give you a few. I don't need a reason to go, but one off the top of my head is it's natural air conditioning. So you can go any time of year, winter, summer, anytime, because usually it's about the same temperature inside of the cave. It's underground, naturally controlled. There's not a whole lot of variation. And so it may be snowy on the hike up, it may be pretty toasty on the hike up to the entrance, but inside you can pretty much bank on the same thing year round. You're going to see things that are not usually seen. They're uncommonly traveled passages, far fewer travelers than would be on your average mountain trail or mountain biking trail. And the cost to get into it is one of the big things. There's a very low initial cost because you want things that can get dirty, you want things that can get ruined for your clothing and things like that. So as far as what you're wearing, not a whole lot of investment. You can use your ratty t-shirt from that concert or that you've had since you were a child, and it'll be a great use for it. Getting into types of caves, there are a bunch of different types of them throughout the world and then throughout the US as well. One of the most common is the karst landscape caves, and those are formed by the dissolution of minerals when water trickles through faults and cracks within rock faces. And these can be in marble, things like gypsum, dolomite, those types of mineral composites, and they create some of these really tight passages, but also huge open cavernous chapel-sized rooms that so much variation and things that you can see within. You also have lava tubes, which we probably have all heard of, but maybe not know how they're formed. When a volcano erupts and that lava flows down, the outside of that lava flow will cool and harden out, and then the rest of what's inside will continue to flow, eventually leaving a hollow tube. And some of these can be straight, just one single passage going for a while. Occasionally they will crisscross and you'll end up with these complex patterns and twists and turns throughout different tubes. Sea or littoral caves are caused by the erosion from waves and tide beating up against the side of a cliff face. And these are very commonly used by animals for refuge and for haven and for maternity litters and things like that. But it's because of erosion, and so the wave force just beats against it until these cracks and faults in the rock eventually become wide and wide and wider. Talus caves are piles of boulder, often things like granite or gneiss, depending on where you're at and how you pronounce, that form these really large angular boulders that will fall off of a rock face and pile up, and you'll end up with some really small tunnels. You'll end up with rooms that open up very large, but they're just piles of boulders that have caused these openings that we can access. And then we have ice caves as well. And there are two types of ice caves. There are ice caves that are rock caves. They're formed out of rock, but they have ice present in them year round. And those are considered ice caves. Then you have caves that are in the face of a glacier, and that is formed by water streaming against the face of it. And eventually it creates this big open area between the bottom face of a glacier and either the bedrock or the sediment that is below it. And these are found throughout the US. The lava tubes typically are found along the coast, anywhere you have present active volcanoes. Same with the sea caves. Talus caves are common in mountainous areas. And the karst landscapes cover, I think it was 20% of the underlying face of our feet in the US is covered by karst landscape. A little bit about the history of caving and caves in the public eye. There have been debates and frustrations and all kinds of cave wars, as it says on the slide, involving caves since they've been discovered and used for more than just shelter by either humans or by animals. In the 50s and 60s, something called the Cave Wars came about. And once people discovered that some of these caves that could be entered by people could be exploited for mineral gain or for tourism gain, they started to battle over rights and ownership of them. And in courtrooms, on the road, they were talking everywhere. One of the biggest things was over in Kentucky with Mammoth, and they were, like I said, they were in courtrooms and things, but people were discovering these smaller caves that were shorter, didn't have to go as far into, but they could still bring tourists into them. And so they were fighting over the tourist dollars and trying to bring them into these areas. And eventually the caves became very exploited through all means. And so a lot of steps were taken to try and remedy that. A couple of which were in 1941, the National Speleological Society was formed to foster education and care and conservation for caves. And 1953, the International Union of Speleology, fun word, was created, and that's over in Europe. And so all over the world, people are gaining more interest and care about the caves because they're realizing that they mean a lot to us, and the things inside of them are not easy to come by. As far as the equipment that is used in caving, there are always new things coming around about how and why and what to use for your equipment. One of the things that stuck around for a long time, though, has been the Jumar Ascender, and it was created by some Swiss alpinists in the late 50s. And it's a mechanical device used for ascending on ropes. And it very much changed the game of rope ascension for caving and for climbing, rappelling, as well as the Petzl Caving Company, Petzl Company, who they have a lot of equipment that specializes in caving, including headlamps and helmets and harnesses, all kinds of different things that you would want to use. And they're very, very dedicated to the safety and efficiency of their equipment. One kind of nifty, fun little fact about the US is Wisconsin was nicknamed the Badger State. And I've heard this before myself. I had to look it up as to why, but the state was nicknamed the Badger State because miners used to stake out lead claims, and they'd mine for lead, but they would often build either into the side of the rock face or inside the cave itself. They would build their home, and so they lived inside of the rock, and people came to call them badgers because of the similarity to a badger den. And apparently it stuck for Wisconsin. Let's get into a little bit of the safety and equipment and other information that you need to know to actually get started with caving. We at SheGEMS, we aim to provide a spot where people can get the information and resources that they need to safely recreate. And so hopefully these next few slides will help you to do so. First off, some of the risks that are involved with caving, many of them are probably what you would assume, being underground and in rocks. You've got, as listed here, hypothermia is a big one, especially if you're caving in a cave that has water inside of it. There's the risk of getting wet, or just the spray coming off, even if you're not in the water, can soak your clothing. And when you're sitting at 40, 42, 45 degrees at long term, that can make a big difference, and you can start to feel the effects of hypothermia relatively quickly. Falling is one of the other risks. And with falling, one of the things that you can do to remedy that is a big part of it is 3 points of contact. So when you are caving, if you're going down a face, or if you're climbing down a rock, or you're scrambling over something, make sure that you always have at least one hand and 2 feet, or 2 hands and 1 foot, 3 points of contact on wherever you're climbing at and whatever you're trying to go through. And that'll ensure that you are able to safely descend or ascend whatever it is that you're trying to do. Flooding is a common occurrence in coastal caves, as well as places that have rivers inside of them that may experience heavy rainfall. This comes down to checking the weather, checking with your local outdoor, wherever they may be, BLM, Park Service, Forest Service, who has information about those caves, checking with them to see what times of year those places are safe to recreate in, and making sure that you have somebody with you, of course, who knows the cave that you're going into, and we'll cover that later as well. But most of these can be remedied by just making sound decisions and staying within your abilities, having the knowledge, the preparation, the attention, and the care to your trip and to where you're going through. With preparation, there are a bunch of, if you look online, there are a bunch of different outdoor emergency plans that you can find that are like templates. And if you don't know how to begin your own, then you can use one of these as kind of an outline to have for your emergency plan. But let somebody know where you're going, who's not going with you. Let somebody know where you're going, how long you plan to be gone, when you plan on being back, if you're going to need anything while you're gone, things like that, so that then when you get back, they know that you've returned. And if you don't, then they can actually make the effort to reach out and see if some help needs to be had. Know the cave terrain, and this comes from asking people who are in the area who are either part of groups who regularly cave called grottos, or if they are working with the, like I said, the Park Service or the BLM, knowing what you're prepared for. So if you're going to be in something that's really, really rocky and tight spaced, what kind of gear you'll need, as opposed to something that's very open and you're going to be walking the majority of the time. Also know your skill level. Don't overestimate your skill level. Be respectful of your skill level, because it will keep you safe and it will keep you people around you safe as well. Closure dates with caves usually are either because of weather impact. So they may be closed in the winter during the rainy season because of risk of flooding or collapse. They may be closed at certain times throughout the year because of animals that are using them as a habitat. There's a cave here in Wyoming that is closed during the summer because it's a maternity roost for bats. And so during that time, they keep it closed to the public so that they don't have that disruption. So make sure that going to a cave that is actually open if you're planning a trip. Never cave alone. Always have people with you, at least one. 4 to 6 people is the ideal group size for going caving because it's not so large that you're going to dramatically impact your surroundings, but it's also large enough, pardon me, that you will always have a buddy and you always have people with you who know where you are or know where you're going. One of the biggest things to do before you go caving is to check all your light sources. That includes your primary light that sits on your helmet. That includes your backup light and your backup. Make sure that you have good light bulbs, that they are fresh. Your bulbs are clean. Make sure that you have extra batteries for every source of light that you have. Running out of light inside of a cave would not be fun. And so this is one easy thing that you can do ahead of time to just make sure that you will always be prepared inside of the cave. On to the gear, speaking of helmets and lights. With this list, a lot of the things on here are clothing items and gear that you would expect to see on pretty much any outdoor excursion list, just as basics. Some of the things that you wouldn't usually see would be the helmet and the helmet mounted light. Your helmet should be one of the ones with the chin strap because it secures it to your head and it makes sure that if you tip over or if you fall down, it's not going to knock off of your head. And your light, a lot of the helmets for climbing and caving specifically have brackets on them or attachment points where you can put things through to secure your lamp to your helmet. And those are always going to be just an absolutely necessary piece of equipment, because even if you feel that you're a confident caver and that you know what you're doing, the cave has other plans. And so you may be going through just fine, you're paying attention to where your head is, but occasionally a rock will fall off the ceiling or some little piece will get knocked loose from somebody who's up above you that you didn't plan on. And that helmet will be very handy at that point. Your boots should have good tread. They don't need to be brand new, but make sure that they have good tread. There's a lot of slippery, sandy, dusty spots in caves, and you want to make sure that you have good traction because that is 2 of your points of contact, and you want to make sure that you are always secure on those spots. Some caves that you'll go through will have rocky spots where you have to crawl or squirm through, and so then elbow and knee pads may come in handy, as well as gloves. Gloves help you with traction. You can get ones that have grip on them from different varieties. You can get ones that are made for construction that have the grip, ones that are made for the outdoors, and they all work very well. Layers, we mentioned hyperthermia earlier, and layers are important to combat that. When I cave, I have a set of coveralls that I got from a secondhand store now as an adult. And I love that because it zips up, covers all of it. I can wear my layers underneath, and then I don't have a belt line for sand to get in at my waist. And I got it, like I said, I got it at a secondhand store. It was probably a work uniform for some variety of mechanic or something out there. Extra change of clothes, getting down to the bottom of that list, an extra change of clothes is crucial because you may get wet, you may get something ripped, you want to have a backup change. And alongside that extra change of clothes, I would say you want an extra change of clothes, but you want 2 extra changes of socks. Especially if you're going into a cave that has water in it, just so that you make sure that you have dry feet and you're comfortable. Second part of the gear requirements, this is the just basic gear part of it, not your clothing. Duct tape is, everybody loves duct tape. It fixes so many things, and it's easy to carry into the cave. When I and my family and friends go into the cave, typically we won't take an entire roll. It's bulky, it takes up a lot of room, and we probably don't need an entire roll of duct tape. So we often will wrap duct tape around our water bottle and layer it up, and then it pulls off just the same as it does off the roll, but it's contained and easy to access for taping up elbow pads or fixing a broken bracket on your helmet to keep your light on. Your backup light sources, batteries, bulbs, all of that stuff goes back to the making sure that your light sources are fully checked and stocked before you go in. You want to make sure that you have 3 sources of light: your primary, a backup, and a backup, just in case something fails. Large garbage bags, at least one, either for carrying out wet clothing so it doesn't soak the rest of your gear, or also for carrying out trash, which is a crucial part of being a responsible caver, is carrying out all of your trash, including all liquid waste. We'll get to that later, but on this gear list is definitely stated a pee bottle, and we know everybody loves that topic. So, but we'll get into that a little bit more in a couple of slides. Your first aid kit, all of this basic equipment that you would usually bring through with you, notepad and writing tool, not only for yourself to make notes or something if you want to inside of the cave, but to just in case at the entrance of a cave, they don't have a caver log, an entrance log, then you have a tool and paper to leave a note of who went through. And I will also get into that in a couple of slides as well. Your Ziploc bags for carrying out trash or for carrying out any kind of random waste that you may have, including solid human waste. Also, we'll get to that. Whistle, basic. Permits, passes, and maps. A lot of caves that you will go to are either on private land or they are on BLM land, Park Service land, that they have put a gate over the entrance to the cave in an attempt to keep out people vandalizing, people from squatting, people from entry without knowledge, who are being unsafe. And so you'll go to these local offices and put in a request that you're going to be going to the cave, let them know when you're going, and they'll give you a key or a code if it's a lock, code lock. You also may need to get passes at some places, depending on if it's on Forest Service land or anything that is extra on top of just registering to use the cave. You may have to have a day use permit or something like that. And then the maps, you can find maps for most caves, but this also goes back to, you want to make sure that you have somebody familiar with the cave, at least 1 to 2 people with you who are familiar with the cave, who are coming along on your trip, because then they will know how to read the map and the places on that map that you're going, because maps for caves with their 3 dimensions can be a little mind-boggling sometimes in comparison to just a regular topography map of a mountainside. As far as getting your gear, like I said earlier, it's a relatively low cost outdoor sport to get into. And as you can see in this photo here, this is one of mine. My shirt's ripped. I've got on just a bandana that I had underneath my helmet. Not fancy gear by any means. It was a very low cost trip to go on. You can source things at secondhand shops, like I said, for my coveralls that I have. There are some places, especially where caves are more concentrated. This is, I think, more common on the East Coast and the eastern side of the country, and then sometimes along the western coast where they have sea caves and the lava tubes. You can find gear shops that will actually have caving gear for rent, and they usually have it at a pretty reasonable price. And then another resource, of course, is grotto members. So reaching out to people in your area who are members of a local cave group and seeing what they have, if they have something that they can lend you or that you could purchase from them as used. And it's a wonderful resource to have. And the people involved truly care about caving and keeping it, keeping the conservation aspect alive. And so they will be happy to usually help. Food and hydration. So even if there's water inside of a cave, when you're going through it, some of the ones I've been through have a river. Bring more drinking water than you think you will need, because that water is never guaranteed source. And because it's a small, closed, fragile ecosystem, you don't want to be pulling anything from it. And so you always want to make sure that you bring more water than you think you will ever need. One of the benefits of this, one of the perks, is that going in caving, you're not going to be carrying quite as much gear as you would be if you were going on a backpacking trip, or if you were traveling with a mountain bike for a long ways. So the water that you're carrying, the weight of it is fully doable because you don't have all that extra gear that you would usually have going into the outdoors. When it comes to food, bring food that's high energy, easy to package and store and carry with you. The question that I asked at the beginning of this, if anybody else saw it, was, what is your favorite impractical food to bring with you on outdoor excursions? When I go caving, I love to bring bananas. They get beat up. I try and wrap them in my spare clothes, but for some reason, I just love to have a banana in the cave. I suffer the consequences of a bruised banana most of the time. But things like granola bars, trail mix, fruit roll-ups, sausage or salami rolls, cheese blocks, things like that. Also freeze-dried or dehydrated foods that you can rehydrate with the water you have, that you can enjoy cold. And that is because inside the cave, you don't want to be lighting any fires. You don't want to have any kind of stove going, because the heat that it causes and the carbon dioxide that it emits can drastically change the inside of a cave. It can change the entire ecosystem. It can throw things completely out of whack. As I mentioned earlier, karst landscapes and caves are created by the dissolution of certain minerals. So if you introduce extra CO2 into that atmosphere, it's going to speed up the breakdown of those minerals. And so you want to enjoy things that are cold or that you can bring with you that are already prepared. Here we are with the waste removal. With solid and liquid waste, that means everything from food waste, packaging, trash, to human waste. With the pee bottle, it is a good idea to bring one that is either a wide mouth bottle, with if you have a problem with aiming, I suppose, with one of the things that's the funnel, things called like the Shiwi or the Go Girl, can help direct. And you can then put that bottle that seals inside of an extra like gallon size bag to prevent any possible spillage. But and then same with liquid solid waste. Make sure that you take any solid waste with you as well. So that's why you want to bring extra bags, either Ziploc or waste bags, whatever type of bags you use. The ammonia, same as CO2 with your breath and fire, ammonia introduced into a closed ecosystem like a cave can also drastically change it. And so while we may not think that one person may have an effect, if everyone does it and all of the people have that effect, then it will eventually make an impact in the negative manner. Also plastic waste, you want to take all the plastic with you. caves are often very dry. Even when there's a river flowing through them, there's sometimes no animals to help with decomposition. And so things that are left inside take a very, very long time to degrade. So you want to make sure that you always take them with you. Which goes to leave no trace in caves. Minimum impact caving is the effort. When you're walking through a cave, try to avoid, when you're walking, things that look to the side like they've never been trampled on. Especially if they've never been trampled on, don't trample on them yourself. There are things like this, the speleothems within a cave, so stalactites, stalagmites, mineral flows, microbial mats. There are a bunch of different fun words inside of caves. They're all very, very fragile. And so if you can make sure to follow the same track that everyone has taken within a cave, it'll minimize the impact that we as outside factors have on that cave, which also includes touching as little as possible. Don't grab or stroke or break off speleothems that are in the in the area. They take a long, long time to form, and sometimes they are crucial to the dynamic of the cave and the animals that may live within. One of the caver mottos is the take nothing but photos, leave nothing but carefully placed footprints, and kill nothing but time. And I love that. I think that is very accurate for the leave no trace aspect. Another part that comes into that I'm going to talk about in this next slide is WNS, which is white nose syndrome. Make sure to follow white nose syndrome decontamination protocols. And because caves are not only home, habitat, and haven for many creatures, there are things out there and animals and species that we are still discovering every year that are new to caves, that have never seen the outside of the cave. They've never seen or experienced a difference in temperature or a difference in CO2 concentration. And so our introduction must be very carefully done, because otherwise we have a risk of throwing off their entire balance. And with white nose syndrome, we have this cute little picture of the bats here. White nose syndrome is a fungus that infects bats on their nose, and it looks white. And what it does in the long run is it speeds up their metabolism while they're hibernating, so that they burn off more fuel than they are able to absorb before hibernation, and they end up suffering from starvation. And so it's a huge problem with a lot of bats throughout the country, especially over on the northeastern part of the country. And they're working on tons of different methods for control over there. That's why this message is so important to spread. This slide here has a ton of information. I do not expect you to read it. At the end of this presentation, there will be a link to the white nose syndrome prevention site, and all of this information will be on there. But it's very important that we take care of that. The other reason that conservation inside of caves is important is because, like I said earlier, 20% of the US is underlain by karst landscape. 40% of the groundwater that is used for drinking water comes from these karst aquifers. So if we can keep our caves clean and we can keep our caves safe, then we will have better groundwater and better resources for longer. As far as benefits for the clubs, so grottos I mentioned earlier, and grottos are through the National Speleological Society. There are grottos throughout the entire US in different places, and you can find them. I'll post a link as well at the end of this for access to local grottos. They usually require some kind of due. It's usually not a whole lot yearly. and it gets you access to information about upcoming trips. If you don't know anyone else who caves and you want to go, but you know you shouldn't go by yourself, people who are going out soon, other information about new techniques and styles or equipment that people may have heard about that you can get information on. You can share trips and stories with people and get their insight on how maybe to make a trip better or what you should do next time. You can also volunteer through them, and there are a lot of caves out there that they were surveyed decades ago, and so they are doing resurveys periodically. And if you're part of a local grotto, then they will send you notifications, and you can go be a part of helping to remap and resurvey those caves. Don't need any experience. You can just go and learn on the job, essentially. There are people there who have the instruments and equipment that they need to do the surveying, and then we come in as volunteers and we can help them with setting up camp in a base location, or just jotting down information, or they'll teach you how to actually use the equipment that they're using. And so there's a lot of really, really good resources that are available through grottos. A lot of universities and colleges also have clubs that are maybe through outdoor education programs, and they'll have information as well about clubs that they have in their area. Accessing caves, a lot of them are on public land, but a lot of them are on private land as well. And so this is where the checking closure dates and seasons, the cave that I mentioned earlier here in Wyoming is closed in the summertime because it's a maternity roost for bats. They didn't know this until a few years ago, and so they actually had their dates flipped, and it was closed in the winter because they thought that it was a hibernation roost. So you always want to make sure to keep up to date on the information that's coming out from these places. The National Speleological Society does have a newsletter, and there are also places online, especially local grottos, who will have information posted about caves on Facebook pages or on their websites as well. If it's a cave on a private landowner's property, then you have to get permission from that private landowner. Often they will have a key that goes to the gate, and just as being respectful and legal, you make sure that you are treating their property well. You always come to them ahead of time for asking or to ask for permission to enter the cave, regardless if you have been there before. And then with local authorities, such as the BLM and National Park Service, as mentioned earlier, Bureau of Land Management, sorry, and National Park Service, they will often have the forms and things to fill out before you make a cave trip, including registration of your number in your party, your time that you plan to be gone, and then they will give you a key, typically, or a code to that gate for you to utilize that you will then bring back after the fact. When you get to a cave as a responsible caver, if there is a party log, which typically is denoted by either something looking like a mailbox or a PVC pipe with caps on the end that's been staked into the ground, there will be usually a writing utensil and a notebook inside of this, or a log book inside of this. And this is used to denote the size of your party, the number, the time that you enter the cave, the time you plan on being in the cave, any additional information on your way in. And then on your way out of the cave, you sign that party log on your way out with your time and date of leaving. That way, if people are coming up who are part of the BLM or National Park Service or Fish and Wildlife, and they're doing a check on those, they know that everyone has left the cave safely, and they don't need to send in a search party for people who may still be trapped inside. And so the party log is a huge thing that you can do for yourself, just as a responsible caver, and to make sure that you and your party are always safe. which goes along with the making sure that somebody outside of your party knows when and where you are going and how long your trips should take. As I mentioned, there are a bunch of online resources that are available. The National Speleological Society has crazy amount of information, and they have brochures, they have articles and publications and book resources that you can find on external websites, links to all types of other different websites who have other information that they don't provide, as well as news on caves and their status and new ones that are opening up, anything that may be getting resurveyed, anything like that, they'll have news on as well. And then the White Nose Syndrome Response Team has all the information on how to properly sterilize and decontaminate your gear after a caving trip, which is very, very important. And I implore all of you to look into that site. And it's not just for caves. If you're inside of caves, under bridges, archways, canyons, any place that bats may congregate or live or hang out, then aim to be a responsible outdoors person and make sure to decontaminate your gear properly. And they give step-by-step process for how to do that. That puts together everything. And so your plan, all the pieces, make sure that you have an appropriate cave, that you have an appropriate guide, somebody who knows the cave that you're planning on going to. Reach out to local grottos. If you don't know anybody yourself, but there's a cave that you're interested in, reach out, see if they've got an event that's coming up that you can join in on. Gather any relevant information about the cave, including closure dates or extra gear that you may need. We didn't cover anything in this course about vertical caving. This is solely pretty much information for horizontal caving. So that's definitely one thing that you would want to look into. If there's a cave that you want to go to that is more vertical ascension, then you'll need to gather further information on that from grotto members and from local chapters as well. Make sure that you have all your gear properly maintained and readied, including your lights and decontamination processes. And then make sure to share your tip itinerary and let somebody know where you're going, that you're planning on having fun, and let them know when you get back, and maybe share some pictures with them. And remember that the beauty and experience of nature is not only found above ground, but there's a whole wide, unique world waiting to be discovered underneath our feet. With that, does anybody have any questions? We'll open it up to questions. There's lightweight plastic single banana holders that work great for packs. I've heard of those. I just have not yet invested in them because I think that there's some nostalgia from getting bruised bananas. Also, a shout out to a couple of my fellow volunteers for some of these photos. A couple of these last ones were Sarah Foster, and she provided me with some wonderful photos. And then here is that link with all of the list with all of those links in it. And I will also post that in the chat real quick right now, so that if anyone wants to save that, highlight it and save it out. What are some of the caves in Wyoming that you've visited is a question that was asked. I have visited Spirit Cave in Wyoming, which is in the northwest corner. And I have visited Tongue River Cave, which is in the north central part of the state. They're great, wonderful, really, really cool caves. Totally different. Spirit Cave is really dry, very dusty, lots of masks required. Tongue River was a little bit longer than Spirit Cave, a little more linear, then leveled, and had a river running through it. Both absolutely gorgeous. I'm glad you guys enjoyed. Can you sleep in caves? There are places where, yes, there are some caves that are so large that you have to sleep in them if you are planning on doing the full excursion of them. Especially if there are Horse Thief Cave, which is in the northern part of Wyoming and goes into Montana as well. They're doing a resurvey of that cave over the next, I believe, 10 years. It's a long project. And so they actually do have to set up base camps within the cave in order to get any amount of work done in a day. They can't just travel in and do it in that short amount of time and travel back out. They do have to set up a base camp within. So the answer is yes, you can. You may get a little chilly, and there are some places where if there's a lot of animals or a delicate ecosystem, it may be you may want to decide whether or not you want to if you have a big group because of the amount of breath that you would exhale throughout that whole course of being there. Where is your favorite cave? My favorite cave is probably Tongue River Cave. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. There's a river through it. There's a couple of waterfalls, variety of different rooms, and my favorite part about it is that there's no bugs inside. So you can just sit down and not worry about anything crawling up on you. But that's also definitely a thing for a mountainous cave. They're less populated by critters and crawlies. What is a cave you would like to visit? I would like to visit the cave up in Alaska on Prince of Wales Island. I may be incorrect on the name, but I believe it was the El Capitan. That's a cave I've heard about for a long time, and I would really like to go visit, just because it's pretty unique as a cave for that area. And I lived not far from there for a while, and so I would love to go visit that one.
Hello again. All right. Well, thank you so much. I think I can stop the recordings. Don't think there are maybe any more questions. Last
Looks
call
like
for
not.
questions. Okay, let's